Everyone, welcome to Culture Shock. This is a show where we talk about all things Gen Z and culture. That includes film, music, TV, comics, you name it. Today, I'm speaking to Elayna Christine, who is a professor at the University of Miami and also is somebody who is big in the speaking space, a multimedia platform builder, also as well an expert on Gen Z and a general partner at Distribution Capital. We touch a lot on the culture, the internet, and as well where Gen Z is and what the future looks like for media in today's world. If you do enjoy this episode, make sure to subscribe down below. As well, guys, check out all of our social media and our merch store. Without further ado, let's get to it. Elayna, welcome to the show.
Yay! Thank you, Tristan. Thank you so much for having me.
So, for those that don't know you, tell your story.
Yeah. So I come from a traditional news media background. I love the art of storytelling and did that for some time with EW Scripts. I studied journalism, but I also studied the art of human behavior. So I think that blend gives me both a love for storytelling, but also a love for how we interact with each other. So I was a producer for some time, and during my time as a producer, this is where I really understood how to capture attention, right? So we live in this like attention economy right now. And when I was producing and writing for, I think my demographic was like those women who tune in to Judge Judy and then watch the news shortly thereafter. So creating things to make them want to be interested in watching the news, the 6 o'clock news, was really my jam. And so fast forward to now, I own a speakers bureau, and I work with thought leaders, subject matter experts, best-selling authors, in partnership with different corporations. But I'm also interested in creating independent or owned media platforms for subject matter experts and investing in those as well. And so I'm really excited to chat a little bit. There's so much to get into, and just so great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not the first time, too, that we've chatted. And our first time that we ever chatted was probably one of the best conversations I've had in quite some time with individuals. So, on this podcast, the first question that I am going to start asking people is, what does culture mean to you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think it's changes, right? I think culture is, and this is like super cliche, but we say like the fabric of our society. But I kind of resonate with the idea that culture operates at that layer that kind of connects us all. And it's just a mashup of a lot of different things. Hard to define because it's always moving, but it's essentially the essence, I would say, of a group of people within a specific region. The change of that is really interesting because there's so much, and like, so we have to also ask ourselves too, who drives and shifts the culture? Before, culture was defined and shifted based on the customs of a specific group of people within a region. But because we're a lot more interconnected in this like fabric sense, that has changed so much where we're seeing a lot more interconnectivity. So the question then becomes, who is driving that culture and what does that mean? And how do they define what culture is?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've come to learn over the last, call it 5 to 7 years, which is that, like, because of the internet, no matter whether you live in, like, the United States or whether you live in the smallest part of Ireland or you live in a remote island off the coast of, let's say, Australia, whatever, as long as you have an internet connection and you're able to talk into the endless void of the internet, there's always going to be this conversation of like what is out there more than ever. I always hear this from people where it's like, especially because I'm a metal guy, where it's like metal there's always like this two sides of things where like metal for even still to this day is looked at by like a large percentage of the population is like scary demonic music, and then there's like the industry fact of like, hey, rock and metal is like the second biggest genre of music and also like the biggest category of live music at concerts these days, and I'm like, one of these things cannot be the other. So I think that's something that I like found fascinating, but also like the same thing with film and television, where it's like, it's hard to say that culture doesn't drive stuff like
Mm,
the Marvel Cinematic Universe unless it's demanded by the fans or demanded
right.
by certain people. So I wonder as well, like, what that means for like the generation that we currently have right now.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And even when we talk about film and media, because I know that you have a long history in being a
Yeah.
content creator and a deep interest in film and media, and it's like even when we were growing up, our relationship and connection with media and the way that we engage with it. I mean, talk about like Saturday morning cartoons and time after
Yep.
school, where we would just spend a lot of our downtime not in front of devices, but really just watching TV. We had the TV guide would tell us what time things would happen, and then we also had like more weekly releases, more strategically, where we would have to like watch an episode and then wait a week at a certain
Yeah.
time to watch a new episode, and we did that for years across our childhood before streaming, before these things were more
Yeah.
accessible. So, we have even a different connection to media and film and than even we have now through just the introduction of streaming and social media. And yeah, it's just so amazing to see how much that has differed from now and then.
Yeah, and it just dawned on me as well, like of crazy things to say out loud. It's like I remember VHS tapes before VHS tapes were cool in 2020.
Yeah.
Like there's that. My dad, when I was growing up, had a Chrysler New Yorker, and the only forms of audio in the car were a radio and a cassette player.
Yeah.
So like, first off, I'm dating myself as a kid, being like, "Hey, late '90s kid here, experiencing technology from like the '70s and '80s." But also, I think as well, just like that shift that you
Yeah.
mentioned, where it's like we enjoyed waiting every week for a television show and like knew that, okay, I've got to be on the couch at this time to watch this.
Yeah.
Um Saturday cartoons, man, were a fun time. I'm
Yeah.
old enough to remember when Mad was not just a magazine, but it had a block of
Yes.
programming on Cartoon Network. So to anyone who remembers that time, you were I'm not paying for your therapy bills right now because of mentioning that. You know,
One of the
but
best times. One of the best times for just, you know, entertainment.
yeah, I always had this belief that um, it was weird. I talked about this to somebody who did television programming, where I said, for me as a kid, Disney was great at cartoons.
Hmm.
Nickelodeon was better at live action.
True.
And, because like Disney had Phineas and Ferb, they had Gravity Falls, they had all these other great animation projects. Not to say that they were good at live nation or live action stuff as well, but there's just something where like I put it to the test with somebody where I said like if you draw a line in the middle and then you compare Disney programming of like 2005 to 2014 compared to Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Nickelodeon's wins on merit alone. Victorious,
Yeah.
Big Time Rush, Zoe 101, Drake
Yeah.
and Josh, like
Oh man.
that,
You
and
know what's
even that's it's that culture, cuz you look at it these days, like 90% of the people who I think were on Victorious are like Grammy, like they've hit the mainstream. What was it? Leon Thomas
yeah.
got nominated for a Grammy this year as well. So it's like we knew how good you were,
I
10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I actually forgot that Leon Thomas was on Victorious, actually. Like you connecting those dots, because what's really interesting about that time also is that even when you are like, so being a late '90s kid, I'm born in '94, and so
Sure.
what before, like, in order when I was growing up, it was like how it wasn't a question of like how old are you. It was like what are you used to watching? Like so when you mentioned like Big Time Rush, Big Time Rush and Victorious and all that, I'm like, oh, I was watching all that and Keenan and Kel and
Yeah,
and then like as told by Ginger and so Rocket Power and Rugrats, and so even what you were watching during that era, uh, kind of dates like how old you are, where you fit in that whole time period that we existed in, which is also something that's, like if you say like Zach and Cody was playing when I
yep,
was already a little bit older, right? So, but it was still very much part of that programming. I was watching Courage the Cowardly Dog and Ren and
yeah,
Stimpy, Rocco's Modern Life, and all those kinds of things. And yeah, so it's just amazing. I don't know if we have things that are similar now where you're just like, what are you watching? And I'm not sure that when you hear those answers that can, that
yeah.
that contributes to like how old you are, where everything about that time period has changed so much that the way that we even interact is just totally different from then and now.
Yeah, like I remember a good friend of mine, I was having a conversation with him and we talked about how back in like the 50s and 60s, people considered things to be like the golden era
Mm,
of film or television. And then I just said it bluntly to him. I was like, I feel like the mid 2000s to 2020, so 2005 to 2020 was probably on par television and film wise with the 1950s and 60s.
yeah.
And I was like, I have not found anyone that can disagree with that.
Hmm.
I also think it's a period of time where nothing will ever get replicated. The
Yeah,
business
that's why.
models that allowed certain things to happen will
Yeah.
never be allowed to happen again.
I think we're done with
You
it. Yeah.
know,
And that's
like
what people.
I remember good friend of mine again who was in television programming. We joked about this um a few years ago where he's like we were talking about the CW when they were
Oh yes.
shifting ownership. And he's like, I don't think you realize that 95% of people in Hollywood not have allowed some of the things that
Oh
we
my god.
did.
Yeah.
Where it's like they would allow shows to continue going even if it didn't deserve the merits of it.
Yeah.
Or, like there's some shows that like they kept on the network just for the sake of like knowing that people wanted it.
Yeah, not because
Like
of the
again, like after like I always tell people, I'm like, I wonder when the or sorry, there used to be a joke that with Supernatural, like the guy who ran the CW at the time, people would ask him during press events. It's like, so when are you guys going to wrap up the show? And his answer every year would be whenever the guys want to do it.
yeah.
And I'm just like, that's kind of like the best answer you can give.
Yeah.
Is like, but yeah, I mean, like it sucks that we're in this period where it's like I don't watch Disney anymore. I don't watch
Right.
Nickelodeon. I mean, I would gladly do it.
Hmm.
And then also you said something that I latched on to, and we talked about this the last time we spoke, was that I remember a period of time in internet content and
Yes.
culture that a lot of people don't remember.
Yeah.
Because spoiler for those that don't know me, I've been watching YouTube since 2006. It's been 20 almost 20 years since I started watching YouTube.
Yeah.
And that means that I was around for channels like Winecone, Lonely Girl 15, Smosh, Marble Hornets, Philip DeFranco, What the Buck, with a ton of other names that you're probably having a shell shock moment listening to this. Um, and it's weird. Like I find more fascination in going back and watching those old videos
Yeah.
than I probably do watching television these days or streaming these days.
Yeah, it's true. And, of course, you know that one of my biggest interests right now, and even with my fund and just in my work, is trying to help people really understand, especially from the creator lens, how much opportunity still exists on, just your domain, and how there we're in such a beautiful opportune time right now, because it used to be really expensive to build really large properties on domains. Like, you would have to have a full team of engineers to help you build that structure out to have
Yeah,
something functional. Or, you would have the platforms that allowed for that infrastructure to be built on top of, but it was never really yours. And now I think that we've gotten to a place where a lot of the audiences, a lot of the creators that have amassed these audiences, are in these like codependent relationships with the algorithm and these companies that put a lot towards the algorithms. And I think that the introduction of money and interest in the data, but also algorithms, has really shifted. So like before on YouTube, and you can speak to this a little bit, I'm sure that it was
yeah,
less of what was put in front of you and more of what your interests were. And so that's the biggest difference, where you kind of just enjoyed the things that you like to watch without there being a motivation of reach and audience building or like advertisement. And I think that the introduction of money into media and film in a different way that catered more towards advertisers and the attention economy shifted the way that even we engage with things like YouTube. So the old day was just, I'm watching these shows because I like them, and there was no motivation for me to like them. Now it's, well, you're governed, even as a creator, by the algorithm, an algorithm that says whether or not your material is being viewed and how
yeah,
often. And you have to essentially push out content, a lot of content, to even find an algorithmic pattern, to find an audience that would be interested in your stuff. And I think that the future, the very close future, right, what's on the, just, we're only, it just requires a fundamental shift in how we understand these things. And maybe more large YouTube channels have to be just abruptly deleted based on just very just random rules behind just, terms of usage. And just maybe that needs
yeah.
to happen more. There just needs to be something disruptive that happens that gets people and creators to understand that, hey, you can actually build a platform that you actually own and drive an audience to it without the codependency on this algorithm. And that's what I'm really interested in right now.
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong in that. And one thing that I've started to tell people probably over the last 5 years when it came to algorithms is like, don't do what the algorithm tells you to make. Like, you yourself know your audience better than what some system or like collection of data points things.
Hmm.
I'm from the time period on the internet where, and this will probably set you back as well, of like when you watched a YouTube video and you saw that the video was stuck on 301 views, you knew you had something special. You didn't need to find out like
Yeah.
instantly, oh my god, I had a 100 million view video. It's like
Yes.
you knew just off that one thing alone, hey, if I'm froze at this, like I'm good.
Yeah.
you know? And also, if you were part of the era of videos when it hit 301 views and stuck for a day or two, again, not paying for your therapy bills. I'm not doing that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm bringing up a lot of old lore that people are gonna have to look up on the internet or like, you know, like scream in frustration about. But I think as well, what people forget too is that even in the very early days of YouTube, and talking 2007, 2008, we already started having product placements and brand deals
Hmm.
and advertising. Um, this is something that a friend of mine just asked me about, who's a marketing professor. He's like, "Can you go on the internet and find, especially when it came to YouTube, like the first advertising or brand deals or product placements?" I was like, "Can I?" I'm like, "I know the exact videos
Wow.
that you know." And spoiler, it was Lonely Girl.
Oh, there you
They
go.
they did a thing where the main character, she chewed some like icebreaker sour gum or something like
Oh,
that.
okay.
And
And
then Neutrogena as well, they were like, "Hey, we want to do this like campaign with you guys," and they're like, "Yeah, not only are we gonna do this, the creators of the show were like, not only are we gonna do this campaign with you guys, but also because like we need like a character to fit in very well with the plot of this show right now. It's like, how about we create this fictional character who used to or currently still works at Neutrogena that can then assist the rest of the characters." And that character became a mainstay on the show as well. So I'm also like, okay, we had like brand placements, advertising, everything that you could think of done from like the very early days of the internet.
which is,
um
I think, the fundamental shift in what you're describing and what exists now is that that would be considered more of an immersive advertising, right? So like
yeah,
when you use the channel itself and partner with the creators to be like, and that this is more close to brand partnerships in the more traditional sense right
yeah,
now, but it operates a little bit differently where it's more like baked into the storyline. Like there's more storytelling within it. It's more immersive, it's more native, where it's like you're chewing the gum and you might hold up like the
yeah.
gum wrapper to the camera, but it's not so overt like every
Now
major.
these days, like every video is like, this
Yes.
video is sponsored to
Oh my
by this
gosh, and it's
company.
like, like GoPro, like, GoPro is the best GoPro, and I love GoPro. Thank you so much to GoPro for sponsoring this channel. It's more
Yeah,
of like a commercial and less of like an immersive ad within that kind of
yeah,
blends into the scene and the storyline more, and I think that that art has been lost,
yes,
or it just hasn't translate over to where we are now. It's either the very
yeah,
overt sponsor ad read 30-second slots that creators sell, or the brand partnership that's like all about the product itself, or the disruption of, the 30-second flash of an ad by, but where YouTube has a more interest in to push,
yeah,
relevant businesses to these, as part of these channels, in front of their audiences. And so that has changed a lot. I mean, I think that I would much rather prefer just the art of that immersive advertising. I think there were
yeah,
a lot of, like I'm thinking about movies. They used to do this a lot, where there would be a
yes,
fight scene happening, and then it just so happens that a box is shown, like a Cheerios
yeah,
box, but it's not the focal point of the scene or the story. And so you
yeah.
kind of, that operates more subconsciously when you're talking about advertising, where it's like you'll remember it later, like, oh yeah, I've seen that somewhere before. And that's kind of, it speaks to your subconscious a little bit to drive your decision making, but not so overtly. And stuff like that is also very interesting, but that is a culture shock, to describe how much it's changed.
First off, pun intended. I love the callback to the name of the show.
Yeah.
But I think again, like that's what made that point in time in the internet so special. It is also like the kind of content you could create then. It depends on the genre that you're in or like what you're trying to achieve. I think like 95% of what was done back then can still be achieved today.
Hmm.
Um, the crazy sort of sad thing is that, and harping a little bit on Lonely Girl, is like so many people have asked like the creators like, do you think it's possible that somebody could do this today? And like they're like, not without eventually getting caught.
Wow.
And like because the internet is much quicker these days to distrust like anything, it's like it would not take the months that it took for people to catch up. It would take like days or weeks. Like,
Hmm.
um, I think also just the manpower of like armchair detectives now compared to like back then was like it's tenfold.
Yeah.
Um, so like I think that there's that, but it's fun reminiscing down memory lane. Going to today's generation, like you're really focused on Gen Z, and I think you and I are very much aligned on like where Gen Z like they're attention, their consumption is at. Like,
Mhm.
where do you see like the future?
It's really interesting to talk about Gen Z because I think that they are the disruptor of the traditional advertising and marketing strategies that have been leveraged for the past, since we've transitioned in our focus here. In the way that, even YouTube, how it was more immersive, now it's more overt. Gen Z is the disrupting generation to say, I don't know about that. Like, because they are sort of resistant. Because a lot of the times, like, you think about Gen Z creators, for example, their thousands and thousands of people platforms are built on organic native trust, which is very, very different. And I talk to Gen Z a lot, and I think I was telling you about a project that we're doing now to take 10 Gen Z creators to Cannes Lions, because Cannes, the biggest international film creativity festival in the world, has a problem where only 15% of Gen Z are represented, and this is like a space where all of the biggest chief marketing officers, advertising companies, and agencies gather to talk about what the state is of the future of creativity, culture, and media. And so, for 15% of that only to be represented by Gen Z is crazy. And so, my ambition there is to insert them into those conversations, because I can tell just by the way that they operate online, and that they are the disruptors of this entire this entire strategy of ads, ad placements. And it's because they themselves, when they were growing up, they started with YouTube channels, and they understood more closely how to engage with algorithms, and what hooks are, and how to create content that drives that attention. And so they are masterful and experts at the attention economy, but from a more organic lens. And so I definitely believe that, because of their contribution to the space, and because they show up a little differently, because they don't use ads to create that reach. They don't use any of those tools for reach. That they and them setting the tone will say what the future looks like for advertising, media, and so on and so forth. But I think it's different than what we've seen before, because again, everything that they do is rooted in organic native trust, and that's the change. That's the
Yeah,
secret.
absolutely. One thing that I wonder, and this is kind of a callback to earlier in your career, is
Hmm.
at one point you were a social media ambassador for HBO. I
Yeah,
wonder what like tactics from back then, 10 or however many years ago it was, do you think that Gen Z today would like latch onto? Because everybody knows how good HBO was back in the
oh my
day,
god, HBO was amazing back then. Yeah, it
but
was.
like I
Yeah,
wonder, because I feel like HBO is still very much the gold standard of television these
yeah.
days, and
You know what it is
so
in that it's just, what I think also is that we're shifting towards offline. So a lot of my work there as a brand ambassador, that was actually during my time in college at the University of Miami, where I teach now as a professor in the School of Communications. It was really focused on how to engage offline with the viewers of the show. And I think at that time, one of the shows that were really big was called Girls. And they had a bunch
yeah,
of other programming that was really popular and relevant to the demographic. But essentially, HBO just gave us a bunch of money to host in person events that were themed around these shows. And so, our target, for example, for girls was like going to all the sorority houses and hosting those in person events. Maybe it was like small things, sleepovers with food, and like a watch, a series to watch where we were watching these shows. Um, yeah, like sleepovers was our biggest thing because the show was girls and we had to capture that audience.
yeah.
But yeah, it was very much in real life. It really wasn't about online presence at all. And I think that that's a really amazing way. And I do think that in real life experiences, gathering offline to create more of those personal, intimate conversations around niches and things that we like is actually also where we're headed. So not only are we headed online for more trust, organic, native, when we're talking about online audiences, but I think there's also a complementary component that is also in person live experiences.
Absolutely. I wonder from your side of the table, as somebody who's both been on the brand ambassador side of things, also now on the more professor side of things,
Hmm.
right? Having a full view, like where do you think companies, brands, entertainment projects have gotten Gen Z wrong?
Oh, I think the dominant narrative, I think it's not, it's a perception issue. I think largely from, even from my lens as a young professor, not even just a professor, I'm having a hard time, even through my colleagues and tenured professors, by getting them to understand that just because you've been doing it for like 30, 40 years in a tenured capacity doesn't mean that your style is the way forward, right? And the
Yeah,
perception that, like, for example, one of the biggest things right now in professors that are tenured and much older, sure, they're absolutely decorated and colored with beautiful resumes and research, and a lot of them come from amazing award-winning backgrounds. But the thing is that it's not about that. It's about your ability to connect with Gen Z.
yeah,
And so because it's such a issue, right? Because it's like a relatability gap right now. So the perception that more seasoned, larger, tenured, decorated people have is that, like, oh, Gen Z is categorically lazy, or they're socially awkward and they don't communicate, or they don't want to contribute to conversations, or they don't. So I think it's a perception mismatch where they assume that an entire generation has these difficulties with engagement or paying attention or talking, even, or like being social. And because they've kind of defined them this way, there's no way that you can close that gap based on this perception. And so the
yeah,
perception issue and the way that they kind of understand Gen Z is where I see, and everything that they built on top of that, right? The ideas, or that's where they get the generation wrong. And I think that that's due to, in part, because there's such a gap in relatability that they don't know how to connect with this group of people. And so that's what is creating this, like, that's actually making the gap bigger, which is, feeding the the perception, or, like, the way that they understand the generation. There's just a fundamental difference in the way that Gen Z operates and the way that they're understood by older generations. And so
yeah,
anything that they build on top, and that's why they have to be the thought leaders, because now someone has to do the work to talk to these senior level executives, to talk to these tenured professors and say, this is what Gen Z likes. This is how you connect with Gen Z. This is how you create things that cater to Gen Z. And so you have to use Gen Z to do that. So part of the work at CAN with these young people is they're meeting with chief brand officers to give them insights on, here's how you engage with a demographic that you don't understand. So it actually puts
yeah.
Gen Z in a really amazing position of authority where traditionally they wouldn't have an authority. And the goal is to close this gap in perception.
I think something interesting that somebody once told me, and the folks that remember metal music of the '90s will certainly understand it. There's the song from Limp Bizkit where or not Limp Bizkit, but Rage Against the Machine, where it's fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
Hmm.
And somebody that I know very well was like, that's sort of the mantra of Gen Z these days, and I'm like, I think you've hit that on the nail perfectly. Where it's like, even myself, like, granted, I was born in '99. I get told I'm millennial, I'm Gen
Yeah,
Z.
in the
I
middle.
really don't care at this point. But even myself, I subscribe to that all the time. Where I go and look back, like my parents would tell me to do this, and I'd be like, no, I'm not gonna do what you tell me. And so even then, I'm like, I agree with that. I think as well, something that you kind of talked about, where it's like people from older generations like to look at Gen Z or Gen Alpha individuals and sort of put them into this corner. And I think the problem what people have forgotten, and it's the one singular lesson from the movies, is you can't put the baby in the corner.
Mhm.
You can't put baby in a corner and not expect baby to fight back at some point. Um,
He fights back.
so yes, you know, um, I think as well. What I also really do appreciate about the demographic of Gen Z is that they're bringing back a lot of these things that you and I grew up loving, where it's like owning DVDs and CDs and records and VHS,
Yeah.
um, which is something that like I remember going to concerts 10 years ago, and it wasn't like a big thing to see like VHSs and CDs and vinyl on a table. And now, like every concert that I go to, it's there, which I also understand the economics of why,
Yeah.
but it's also nice to be able to be like, man, I remember that as a kid, and now I
Yeah.
have the technology to play records, um, or play cassettes, or even like one day when I was going to a concert in Kansas City, I called my dad because they the headlining band they were doing a pop up, and one of the big things you could get there was this VHS of a show that they did in Amsterdam the winter prior. Um, and I was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like, I feel like we have VHS players.
Hmm.
And my dad's like, not only do we have VHS players, but we have VHS and DVD combo players. I was like,
Yes, that was sick. That was a time.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Uh, so, I have the younger demographic as well, or younger generation than me, to be able to be like, hey, thank you for reminding me of like the things that we have.
Yeah. And
Um,
yeah,
but
that's
I
yeah.
I think that's the crazy thing.
Yeah, and to that point, because we're seeing, if we want to define Gen Z as the drivers of the culture, and just to really, and because they're so anti, like we're not going to be sold to in this like advertisement marketing, in the traditional ways, because they're such disruptors of this category. It only makes sense now to think that they're going back to the time where we weren't dominated by these things, right? Because it's like
Yeah,
okay, we grew up and we had all these really cool, innovative, awesome things that we just enjoyed, and then that all came to a screeching halt because there was an introduction, and during 2 decades of this rapid evolution of technology, interest in this technology from like data and advertising. So if Gen Z's here now and they're just like, you know what, we don't want to be sold to like that, and we're not resonating with that. And if it's not organic and native and trustworthy, then we don't want to be governed by that. And so what you're seeing now then is almost like a regression into things in a time that was like before that very specific time, right? So it's like now, since we're going backwards, where we'll go to head forwards will be dictated by this generation and then generation alpha and then all of those to come. And so there was just like a blip in time where we lost that kind of creativity and just exploration and just like organic entertainment, and now we're
yeah,
going to get back to that, which I think is really exciting. And Gen Z is the generation to be like, yeah, because we don't like this anymore and it's not working anymore. And you know that the signals that I'm taking to really that are telling me that this is the way forward, corporations want it, they need it. I'm having conversations with large corporations, senior level executives that are asking for them to help them understand. That's how like the power dynamics are shifting too.
yeah. I look at and you and I are older enough to remember the original iteration of Blockbuster.
Yeah, which is
Um,
awesome.
but I told someone recently, I was like, I think it's funny that Dish owns Blockbuster, or owns the rights and everything to Blockbuster. And then if you go to blockbuster.com, I don't know, I think it was sometime within the last like 5 6 years that they did this. Is that now the website just has a blank like what banner in the like blockbuster blue color with the logo, and then it says underneath it, "We're currently unwinding your movie." And I'm just like, I'm like, if you all eventually come out with a relaunch of Blockbuster
Oh
in
my
any
gosh.
capacity,
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
like, this is gonna be the greatest thing ever.
And this I like that a lot as just like any brand, any company that partners with Blockbuster to bring back, because I think, and I don't know, I don't like, I'm not a betting woman, but I would bet on the resurgence of, and like like if we're, because imagine if we're going more towards the more native, organic, trustworthy,
Yeah,
that there is a opportunity to capture the nostalgia. And like nostalgia could be a really strategic tool to bring back an entire generation of people to re-engage with different products and to move that forward. These like stagnant or dead companies right now that kind of just don't know where they fit in this era. Now that we're going
yeah,
back to that, I can almost bet that there will be a nostalgia era that we'll go back to, and it'll reinvigorate a lot of consumers to buy things again and engage with things again. And just because the nostalgia, because I have an entire folder on Pinterest that's like nostalgia, and I just like
yeah.
put all of the pins in it that remind me of my childhood. So there could be a large opportunity, and I can almost bet that that's where, if the brands are smart enough, they will capture the interest of this generation by only speaking to the things that we remembered and the things that we trust so much.
Absolutely. So this is the point in time of the show where I do things a little unconventional compared to most podcasts or shows where I let the guests become the host, take over, bring up things that they want to talk about. So, Elayna, floor is yours.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for the platform. So, yeah, I wanted to use this time to talk about the importance of why creators should consider, like, make the case for why creators should consider capturing their namesake domains and creating things on them. And so, starting with the status quo right now, creators are building on what is called rented platforms. And the
Yeah.
conversation around rented platforms is one that has been exhausted for the past, I would say, 3 to 5 years, where there have been people, especially people that work with creators and creator strategy, that say, how are you growing in a way that's going to yield you success in the future? And for a lot of those conversations before I would say, robustness or development of artificial intelligence, which I understand, especially in film and media, can put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, from like a creativity and writing
Yeah.
perspective. But I do want to also make the case that like outside of AI slop in terms of just a shortcut to creating film or a shortcut to creative writing, AI is very useful because now we can create and build with it, right? So it's like you can think of it less of like a creativity tool, but more of like a tool that can support building. When we were and I was one of those people that had a MySpace account, and I used to just for free. There was like this wasn't even a business,
Yep.
but I would create custom layouts, starting with a template, of course, and there were like libraries of templates based on different categories of just your vibe, that you would be able to customize through HTML and CSS. And so even growing up, I loved doing that for my friends. I would even do things like remove the entire URL bar. And so it was like a full screen, MySpace page, embedding music, right? Things like that, a music player, a playlist, changing what the top eight looked like, changing the top eight from top eight to like just the one person. All of those things were possible with code at the time. The evolution of that, though, when we started creating like forums and platforms that were more that were much heavier. I know, Tristan, we talked about Adobe Flash and how that was an absolute
Yeah.
nightmare. An
Yeah.
absolute nightmare to embed videos in websites before this time. because it was so expensive and it was so heavy, and then internet wasn't that great, so it would make things go much slower. And so, if we're thinking about now AI and the tools that we have available to us, we can also identify that there is opportunity for individual creators to now leverage and utilize the access to that on their own namesake domains. So, like, instead of creators using their namesake domains to leverage what I call like 404 redirects, and a
Yeah.
404 redirect is just a page that takes you to another page when a page is broken. What I consider in that case for creators, content creators specifically with very large platforms, is that they typically use their namesake domains as like, follow me on here, like click this button and you'll go to my TikTok, click this button, you'll go to my Instagram, click this button, you'll go to my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That's all they're using their domain spaces for. But because we
Yeah.
have and we exist in this time period where you can use AI to build out these platforms on just a subscription basis without worrying about costs, without worrying about like hosting issues, without it being heavy, you can just talk to a chatbot and say, hey, this is what I want to create. And so my rant and rave for this podcast episode is really just to remind content creators, hopefully you're listening, that there is such real estate on your namesake domain, especially if you are a content creator with a large following and you have an audience. You should be thinking about these platforms at your top of funnel. So in marketing, that's the first touch that people have with you. But then
Yeah.
if you build out your namesake domains to be more media platforms, there's nothing that stops you from using that top of funnel or using your reach already on these platforms to drive and capture your audience to your media platform in your namesake domains. And so you should think about your platforms across YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram more so of like teasers or just ads for yourself to drive traffic
Yeah.
to a domain and platform that you own, and you can build it, you can drive traffic to it. And in that case, you can you yourself can reach out and say, hey, I have uh, a million
Not
views.
only do I have like 150 million followers on TikTok, but also I get a million visits a month on my
Yes.
website.
So
Even
then
if it's
you
not, even if there's nothing to buy there, that's a million.
exactly. Exactly.
And
So then you become that billboard, and then you can negotiate what those terms on directly with these brands and advertisers yourself.
yeah,
No,
and
no
also going
longer
back
at the
to like,
mercy. Yeah, no more at the mercy of algorithms. That's my point.
yeah, I think as well, like going back to the old days of the internet. Um, and I hate bringing it up again because look, what I told somebody one time is like, with Lonely Girl 15, you could look at like anything that we have today, probably from like a community evolution, from a content perspective or business aspect, and it's like they did it and perfected it and did it better than anybody else. Where it's like when I talked to you the last time, I showed you like, hey, the creators of this project, they set up their entire own forum and
Yes.
Wikipedia, and like, right now it's like down. I believe there's like some kind of tech error, which fortunately I was not the first one to be aware of the issue, because like I tweeted one of the creators who's more involved with keeping the archive of things up, and he's like, yeah, I'm aware of it. And I'm like, all right,
Okay.
cool. I'm like, if you're aware of it before I am, I'm like, that's good. Um, but I'm not from a technical background. I can't be like, hey, think this is what's happening. I had to go talk to a few other people to be like, we think this is what the case is. But even then, going back to the initial reason I brought it up is like having that community forum, having that encyclopedia that they built of everything that was special. And then also the same thing too, where like if you had a central landing page for what you were building, then like it became great. That's
Yeah.
why like Machinima was great. Machinima back in the early days, even on YouTube, even though that they held a website, everyone went to Machinima because you knew, like, whether it was Red versus Blue,
Mhm.
or some of these other projects that they did. It was like, this is a place where the internet and culture and gaming nerds can combine.
Which is amazing.
Um, and so I I agree so much with you. I will say I tried doing a personal domain, and I think the thing for me, one, I realized just like, hey, there's the gaming persona of me, and then there's me doing everything else that I do. And so I'm always in this weird class of like, I want to protect this brand, but I'm like, do I really also like want to have a separate domain, separate website, separate everything for me as an individual?
Do
Um,
you remember like you there's more than one way to play a game, right? There's like story mode
yeah,
and then like just free roam mode, right?
yes,
You can create a like so if someone goes to your domain and types in your name, you can do this. You can have a splash page that's like, do you want this or do you want this? And depending on what button they press, it'll take them either here or here. So that's not that
yeah,
hard to execute. You don't have to
yeah.
go either or.
I think also just, and I think some people will understand where I'm coming from. It's like custom domains sometimes are not cheap.
No, it
when
is though. The domain name, yeah, dude, you're
so well,
talking.
so my when I have one for my gaming persona, I think the cost of it. First off, I don't know why my monitor to the left of me decided to turn itself on. Um, or to the right of me. Sorry. I think when I went to potentially renew the domain for my like gaming identity,
Ah,
I think it was something where it's like, hey, like please pay $40, and I'm like, okay, $40 isn't bad, and I'm like, I know because I'm not using a .com. I was using like a .tv extension, which is way more valuable. All this and that.
oh,
I was
that's
like,
why. Yeah.
I get it. But even myself, I'm like, even when being a founder, I'm like, I'm using my GRFK email more. I'm using my personal emails less. I'm really only using this one to filter in like different things as a creator. But then I'm also like, well, if I send people to my GRFK email, then like, one, it looks better on brand stuff and agencies and whatever, versus like my own thing. And so like, I again realize like I am in a way much more complicated position than like 90% of people. But I agree, like, people need to take more opportunity to like diversify themselves, to
And
focus on like, hey, how about you not just put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to content? How about you also figure out like, what am I going to do outside of YouTube or Twitch or TikTok?
and
You know,
and the answers to those questions is not that crazy when you already have an audience that's engaging with you as a creator, right? So like
yeah,
you can try different things. You can just have more proximity to your audience, right? Like that's all it is. It's like you just want to be closer to the people that are engaging with you and you can take their feedback. I think
yeah,
when you're not at the mercy, but it does require you to like, creators also have to think like, okay, what is my strategy to now take the audience that I'm essentially borrowing with YouTube's help and their algorithms and their data and whatever placements they're doing for me, because I have the potential to now make them money with viewership, right?
yeah,
How can I capture even 1% of that? Like, what can I need to create something, a landing page, and then something to capture their emails or something so that I have and I know that you have a newsletter also that you started. So you're kind of, it's like, not like you got to think this is a
yeah,
natural progression into this stuff, right? So it's like,
yeah,
it's not too far fetched to think that capturing a percentage of the audience that already engages with content is important to do for things that you want to do, sell, whatever, build, engage with in the future. Like it's a very straightforward thing. So
yeah,
even if the idea of building a namesake domain that is a media platform is intimidating, you can just have your namesake domain and do something like just capture emails.
yeah,
Like create a newsletter, like something very. But we have to get creators to think that at some point And this is happening right now where creators are like, I haven't had a brand deal. No brands have called me for a deal in months, and I'm having a hard time paying my bills because a lot of what I use my platform for is to partner with different brands for money.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have to have a little bit of high agency here where it's like, well, if their tools
I
exist.
think as well in cases like that, and sorry for cutting you off there,
Mhm.
is that like when creators are only focused on using social media to get like brand deals or opportunities, you're not as focused on like making like authentic, personable,
Great content.
engaging content that people can relate to. And that also then becomes like the double-edged sword where like you're so focused on brands, but if like you're not making great content, brands aren't going to see you. And if brands don't see you, then it's like you're dying on the hill of putting all your eggs in a basket when the basket's still being threaded.
Right.
um
Yeah, but
so
in both scenarios though, you just have to, if you had the metrics yourself to say, I have 1 million visitors on my website. They come on, and here's the metrics over 6 months. I've had 6 million visitors to my website. It
yeah,
doesn't even matter if you're creating content or not. It just matters that you're getting the traffic, which is what advertisers like to see. You just need to switch the
yeah,
power dynamic a little bit. It's like you are the creator that has amassed this giant platform. YouTube and all of these other platforms are benefiting from the fact that you can pick up a camera and even tell a story or create
yeah,
something that's engaging. So you have to put yourself in a position. And this is, I don't engage a lot with content creators, but I engage a lot with subject matter experts who are public facing, right? So they do a lot of
yeah,
keynote speaking, but as doctors, lawyers, and all that kind of stuff, they also have their platforms too. So part of my interest in doing this and having this position is that I want to spread the gospel to content creators, but there is already an entire profession of subject matter experts that are taking this direction. So this is the same stuff I work and tell them to do, but I just want content creators to understand that there's overlap here where they're very similar to subject matter experts,
yeah,
that they can create their own platforms in the same way and drive that traffic there. Subject matter experts have great platforms and terrible audiences, but it doesn't matter
yes,
because they have great platforms, right? So like they don't know how to tap into the algorithm on these outlets like
yeah,
content creators do, but their clientele comes from the platforms themselves that they have, plus the subject matter expertise that they have to offer. So content creators are kind of backwards in that they have great audiences, that they know the algorithm and they can engage, but they don't have platforms. So my
yeah.
desire is just to bring what I know from these people over to content creators because I think that it's also valuable for them.
Yeah, I think you can turn creators into like really good this is always the thing for me, where I've always said I'm twice a college dropout. I never went to an Ivy League school. I've always built startups on my own. I've always forged my own path. I'm my own subject expert in my own way,
Yes.
especially when it comes to the internet. And I've told this 9 million different times to people that run some of the biggest events in the world. Is like, if you want to have a curated thing of people who are industry leaders, that's fine. But I'm like, you're gonna have the same rotating list of speakers that almost every other event or every other sub event of like a major weekend happening. Whereas like if you bring in somebody like me who's been a creator who isn't gonna sugarcoat what it's like for smaller creators and mid-sized creators, then it's like I'm your guy. You
Yeah.
know, like I won't sugarcoat, and I think this is a big thing too, is like so many people I've heard of or heard from since I started like the newsletter are like, this is the first time that I'm ever hearing about you, and like you're really articulate in the things that you're saying and writing, and also like you have the knowledge to back this up. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, I'm not just shooting from like the internet void and hoping that this hits. It's like I understand, all these things. Even like somebody one day asked me, they're like, what do you think about micro dramas coming, like becoming a trend? And I was like, what do you mean being a new thing? I'm like, this has been a thing for 20 years. And like, I remember this. If you don't remember this, you like, I have to sit you down and like show you where people used to film minute to 3 minute long videos, be it in a normal camera length versus vertical, but it was a thing, both scripted and not scripted across the internet. And like, if you don't remember that, then it's like, well, I can't help you. So like, I think that that's certainly a challenge as well. But I think like the other thing too, and this is just my feeling of it, what you're doing by like saying, hey, I want to give these Gen Z individuals and also these other creators essentially a loaded microphone to go and say like, hey, this is everything like that we know deep down inside, and create those like pipe bomb kind of moments.
That's exactly what I'm doing. That's my motivation because yes, I'm used to working with subject matter experts in the more traditional sense, but it's not lost on me that subject matter experts in the way that they're defined previously and now are changing too.
Yeah.
And so that's something.
It's not just because you worked at a Fortune 500
No,
company and you
that doesn't make you a
ran
subject matter.
marketing for 10 years. It's the people who like, oh, you changed the way that we think about content, the way that music is made, the way that television went from being, a hard cam to, hey, if you want to be able to shoot on like a single camera, you can do that. The implementation of ARGs or online components to stuff in traditional media, like I see that happening. There's this one great founder that I know of who did something crazy where he launched a media company where he sort of tricked people a little bit, but he created multiple different accounts. Or actually, no, I'll give you a better example than this one because it's a little bit less convoluted. There's one day where I was scrolling on Instagram and I found this. This was back when like you could find random accounts on your Instagram feed, and it wasn't just like who you're following. But I found this one Instagram page that like set up this whole alternate reality game where like they had people posters and phone numbers that people could call, and like it led to this whole thing where in like reality, like it was a fictional ARG that they ran out of like an escape room in like I forget where. I think it was somewhere on the East Coast, and I was just like, I'm sorry, but I love this. This creativity is great. And like you can only do this if you like understand what it is that you're doing or like trying to, emulate. Like you're not trying to go after like big productions or do stuff
Yeah,
that was crazy. Even like I talked about this with someone a couple of days ago where creativity with Gen Z would absolutely like fly off the walls these days is back when YouTube had annotations, because you could hide stuff in annotations and then like create so much cool shit. Um, like that for me was my favorite thing where like people used to put puzzles and clues to stories that they were telling or like link to stuff that they wanted you to find but didn't want anyone else to find. And if anyone from YouTube is watching this, bring back annotations. Come on. Like restore the functionality, allow like if you had annotations previously, to allow them to still exist, because like that was the best part of YouTube. It was not the end cards or any of that nonsense, but it was truly like if somebody wanted you to see something at a particular second or microsecond of a thing, then it was like boom, got you. And so I think there's that as well. Um, what I also wonder with Gen Z and like culture where we're headed is also on the music side of things. We're starting to see this sort of rebellion, or I think resurgence of a rebellion that we saw back in the 90s where people were angry about how expensive tickets were then, and now we're seeing that again where even like um I remember telling somebody one day we were having lunch and they're like, hey, Taylor Swift fans have just started to sue Ticketmaster, and I was like, I
big move.
don't think people realize how bad that is.
Yeah.
It's like you've taken the most weaponized fan base in all of music and
Yeah.
put them against like the number one enemy in live music.
Yeah. Big, huge. And yeah, I you can speak more to music because I've not really tapped into the
Sure.
music side of things from a business perspective. But yeah, just another example of how Gen Z is just rewriting the narrative and just saying where we're headed without asking first where we're headed.
Yeah, and I think as well, like we're starting to see a lot of better things for the industry. Where
Yeah.
like back then, like it was, and, like I'll be fair, there are some concerts where I'm like, man, it's too expensive to want to go see, or like VIPs. I'm like, there's some bands that I'd love to go see and like have a meet and greet experience for them, but I'm like, man, I can't stomach spending $600 on top of a ticket to go see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, I'd love to go meet Breaking Benjamin, but I'm like, I'm not gonna. Even if the ticket is included in the cost, I'm not spending 500 something dollars to go meet you guys. Like to me, that's tough to formulate.
Do you
There's
think
only so many bands that I'll spend $300 for a concert ticket.
Do you think that the future is more independent, and will independent artists get to set what those costs are without the pressure from the label to make back the money that they got on their advance, and the contract itself, not the advance?
Yeah, I think, and I love that you bring this up because like I was just talking about this with over the past week and a half. Live Nation was doing this Summer of Love tour, or not tour, but a or Summer of Live sale is what I think it was called, and it was like these $30 tickets. Well, historically, if people don't realize, the reason why they mark down these tickets from like let's say $60 or $100 or whatever is because then Live Nation can do or force artists to do more shows to get more food and beverage money out of people like us and trap these artists. And luckily John Bellion, one of my favorite musicians, he realized this quicker than a lot of other people did a few years ago and like paid himself out of his Live Nation contract, out of his record deal, everything. And because he realized like if I'm only making money off of hard ticket sales and you have the right to drop my prices at any time, it's like if I have $1 million thing, I'm never going to be able to pay this back.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
and he's like, and I remember specifically, he once said like, if that's how bad my touring contract is, how bad is my record deal? I think what we started to also see though is these like quasi like independent labels
Hmm.
where or like there's some of my favorite bands who they run their own record label and then partner up with a much established record label that's part of like much larger group. Like there's a band called Spirit Box out of Canada, big metal band, multi Grammy nominated at this point, one of my favorite bands. Who they built their own record label, partnered up with a very well known record label in the rock space that's also owned by BMG, and so like BMG's quasi like championed independent music in that realm. I think and look, like I've invested in music companies that are solving like the independent to fan, solutions and stuff. And even like I through GRFK, we built the first fully independent music group in the world. So like I do agree to an extent that like independent artists should eventually be able to like take over this kind of stuff. And I think the largest problem right now for independent artists, well, there's two, is touring
Yeah.
because like you don't make that much money, especially like you're sleeping in cars or vans or buses. If you're lucky to get a bus, you know. Um, and then the second problem is merchandise. Like somebody talked about this, where it's like you see how many vinyls or CDs that somebody like Taylor Swift puts out for Tortured Poets Department every time that she goes and says, "Hey, I'm going to release this variant of this vinyl because it's got songs that I didn't give anybody, or it's got demos, or whatever the sake is, or maybe it's songs I only gave to people in Japan." Then, not two things would happen. One, anyone that could have been on the top of the Billboard charts gets knocked down to number two or number three or whatever. And then also all the people who are independent musicians who are trying to get vinyl pressings or CDs done for themselves immediately get shot back down to the bottom of the queue because it's like, hey, who's going to sell more volume, you or Taylor Swift?
Right.
So I think like that's a bigger problem as well. Um, I will say this though, shout out to Metallica because
Oh,
somebody brought me onto this a few years ago where they actually bought one of the biggest vinyl pressing plants in the country, and I'm like, of all the people who could do this, that care about music, that understand all the problems of musicians, it's Metallica.
yeah.
you know, so like I think that like that's where we're sort of headed. But yeah, I think like if somebody said like if I could be an independent musician and not have to worry about it, then like great, awesome. And you used to be able to do that. I think you still probably can. Um
Yeah. I mean, what
I
stops, the future? I think the through line in this entire conversation in this episode one is really just the future is more independent, right? Like the
I'll
future is,
actually I'll even give you like a better example now that I just thought about it. There's this girl on social media named Mafra who's really big right now in the rock and metal space because she was doing covers of bands like Bring Me the Horizon, Bad Omens, Spirit Box, etc. Not even signed to a label, like, and her covers were getting onto the top of album chart lists and Billboard, and like she just performed as well. She performed with one of my favorite bands, Ice Nine Kills, for a song that they did a feature with McKenna Grace on. So she did the vocals that McKenna Grace did, and I'm like, dude, I'm like, she's not signed to a label. Like,
there you go.
she's heavily contested between like people loving her music, hating what she does, all this and that. But also, like, she built up something that's great, and like, I love seeing that. Um, I think what places like TikTok have done though, and this is kind of counter the rented platform discussion that we've had, is like I feel like that's what makes some of these platforms very great is because of having that algorithm. You can discover bands or get connected with some bands in a way that like you would never be able to. One of my favorite bands that I loved listening to, even though that they stopped making music, was this band called Prove Your Worth, and they were sort of in this horror metal space. And the first song that they ever did was basically like based off Resident Evil, and
Oh,
I
cool.
loved that
All that
for
series.
them. you know so I think there's that, but also even creator or talk about creators who went independent music who then became big names. Poppy, right? She started out as a YouTuber, then realized like, oh, I have like this really good ability to sing. She was an independent musician for a period of time, and then eventually got signed to a major record label. But even by the time she got signed to that record label, she was already like performing for like WWE events and like already capturing people. And now she's been nominated twice at the Grammys for songs that she's done. She's performed more than once for like she did Jimmy Kimmel, she did Jimmy Fallon, and it's like, okay, you even though that now you're with a major label, it's like you've built that framework where like if I'm a creator today and I wanted to do this, great. Same thing with rest in peace the late great Christina Grimmie, who she made videos of cover songs on YouTube, got onto The Voice, became this well-known singer because of it. Rest in peace to her for passing away tragically too early in life. But even then, like her family has kept her alive through like, hey, we're gonna do this re-release of stuff, or like, hey, we discovered these songs that she never put out. Like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna establish this foundation to also do these other things as well. But even I go like, that's stuff that you can only do if like you tuck this away and like I'm saving this for when I'm independent, or like if I ever want somebody to see the light of day, or um one of my three favorite bands, a band called Sleep Token. They're based in the British metal space. They just had this weird debacle where they're signed to one of Sony's major labels, but they're very big as a band on allowing fan creations, fan edits, and a third party company hired by the label was like striking people down and all sorts of stuff, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Until you realize that the record label only has a license to use the band's name. They don't own the mask. They don't own the artwork. They don't own the image of the band. So now, like, I woke up yesterday and the band post was doing two things. One, they were Instagram story reposting other people's artwork and stuff, and then also they made this quasi like little hint towards like, we really do not care, being like, create at your own forthwith. And I'm like, oh, so like literally you're telling the major label like, hey, we're mad at you, and like fans continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
This is like
I,
the craziest
yeah,
thing
I,
ever.
and one of my favorite things about the moment that we're in and the spirit of transition, and it's really just understanding really where the powers lie and where the powers
Yeah,
exist. I mean, we're getting a power to the people moment in across culture, media, film, entertainment that we really didn't understand that we had. I think our awareness around our own individual power as a collective, as a culture, is being resurged. We're opening ourselves up. We're rediscovering what that actually looks like. And across music, there's and film and TV and entertainment, there have always been these sort of moments of rebellion. But I think right now we're existing in a very unique one that has the power to change the landscape fundamentally.
yeah,
Back to something that we liked, that we were more familiar
a-
with. You know.
absolutely. So I guess rapid fire question to kind of wrap this all up
Sure.
is, for somebody out there who's wanting to explore different forms of culture, what's a television show, a film, and an album that you think
Oh,
somebody should listen to?
Oh, that is so cool. TV, film, and album.
Yeah,
It's so hard because across all of these, it depends really on what um, what you're interested in. I guess for film, I would say I don't know. Maybe I can just Kill Bill, the entire Kill Bill, like from start to finish. I think Kill Bill
yeah,
is a really awesome, because then you get like Quentin Tarantino at the time had his moment, and he sort of made a name for this sort of like gory film that was really different for the time. So I think that that's a really good, and then the story there just is absolutely incredible.
yeah.
So I would say, like, film wise, the Kill Bill, all of them, watch that. I think that that would be worth your time. Album wise, it's really difficult because I don't know.
Music is subjective.
Yeah, music is subjective, and my taste might not be anybody else's taste. But I think the Amy Winehouse Back to Black
Yep.
album was absolutely incredible, because just to put it in perspective, where culture was at that time, where she existed in culture at that time, and how she impacted culture at that time. And also, she was only 23 years old when she made that
Yeah.
album. And I think that understanding, we talk about like Gen Z is defined for the age group of right now, but a 23-year-old in that moment of culture, and her impact there was absolutely incredible. So I would say the Back to Black album by Amy Winehouse, film wise, the Kill Bill series, and then TV. If we wanted to get an understanding of what comedy was back then versus now, I
Yep.
think like Mad TV would be a really awesome series to tap into, just to understand how our culture has changed.
Absolutely. I'm gonna add my own to this list.
Yes, please. What's
So
yours?
for television, look, I'm a sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
I will always die on the hill that Agents of Shield is the greatest television show. Like, if you were somebody that loved comics and any of that, then like you will always feel a sense of enjoyment in. And I think also the thing for me that I love the most about it is that even though it initially was like approved by both sets of Marvel Studios, Marvel Entertainment, it became the black sheep sort of the MCU, where it's like you exist in this same continuity of universe to an extent, but as like the Marvel Cinematic Universe film wise became so much more galactic, the show became more free to do whatever it wanted because there was less like checks and balances from the film side of things to the television people. It eventually became like, hey, unless like you want like certain characters and they're part of the film universe, like you're free to do whatever you wish. And by
Yay!
like season 6 or 7, after like the Infinity War blip, they were like, well, we didn't tell you guys anything, so good luck with the last 2 seasons of whatever you're building. So, which I think was like the best thing ever to like, because there's a story about how with the first series or season of Agents of Shield, because it was leading up to Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where supposedly the edict from Marvel Studios was like, you can't say anything about AI, robots, Hydra, Ultron, this, that, and they're like, well, how do we craft like 15, 16 something episodes until that reveal where we can't say or hint at anything? We can't even mention the word spies.
Yeah.
It's like, good lord. Um, so like I go back even knowing that, and I'm like, what you did with a 22 episode season, which first off, 22 episode seasons were awesome to have. It's an art form that's sorely missed.
Yeah.
I think music wise, there's a band that I recently fell back in love with called Holy Wars. And they just put out this album called Shadow Work Light Work, and I think it's really great. What I find with like a lot of metal bands, and especially female fronted bands, is that they can take a lot of emotional exploration and trauma and feelings and like make something great out of it. So like if you're into that, cool. I would say if you're
Awesome.
not, um I just got this in the mail a couple days ago, and it was a pleasure for me to get it. Was there's this French band called Sid Matters that what it's still relatively unknown to the global population, which sucks because I think that they make really good music, but they got famous because many of the songs from their first album in like 2005 got licensed for the first Life is Strange video game, which as that game defined storytelling and narrative and like event, like choosing your own adventure and like the way games play out, like that became so important. So like they very rarely ever make represses of it, and it's right there, so, like people can kind of see it in the corner. So to me, that's my other thing too, is like now granted all of the audio is in English. It's not you're listening to French. So like people can understand it. I want to make that clear. But still probably my like favorite album that I'm willing to slip in the. And then on a film side of things, I love films that can push the boundary a little bit, sometimes make you go like, what in the absolute hell? Um and I'm going to pick out one that I wish more people knew about, which was
Please,
this
I love
horror.
movies.
It was this horror film called Unfriended. It was done by Blumhouse and Universal, but basically, like the idea of it was that it takes place a year after this tragic girl's died at a high school, and
I've seen
the
it.
whole film takes place on a Skype call,
I've seen
but
it. I loved it.
halfway through or a quarter into the movie, the dead girl's Facebook and the Skype account become active, and it's starting to be like, one of you posted the video that led to me ending my life.
Oh,
Now we're
man.
gonna find out which one of it was, and if not, like I'm gonna subject you to the worst possible things until we get down to it. And like,
That was
I
great.
remember like there's this one girl who I think she's the first one to die, like super bully to everybody, but it's like, oh, she's prone to seizures. Spirit makes the girl drink a bottle of bleach and then like pushes her off the roof, and I'm like, this is the stuff that only you think of if you
Yeah,
like really want to make something
yeah,
stick. Or like
yeah.
my favorite part of it was like, and this is why I'm like terrified to ever play this game. And when people ask me, they're like, "Would you ever play it? Never have I ever." And I'm like, "No," because they did it in this movie where
Oh,
like they held these like sheet. Everyone had these sheets of like the stuff that they supposedly did or didn't do. And then like, one girl is finding out like, oh, you slept with my boyfriend behind my back, like how could you do that? And then like it's something else that the other girl or the other guy did that is like, what the hell, man? And then by the end of it, you like both of them end up dying anyways, and I'm just like wow, that was a
wow,
crazy
that's
turn of
turn.
events.
Yeah,
um
that's nuts. So I love
so
all of.
I still think it's one of my favorites, and I'm actually glad. I was going through a DVD store in my local mall a few months ago, and I actually found it. And I was like, first off, I was like, I thought that this was lost to like streaming or like pay to rent at
Yeah,
this point. So I was like, having the DVD of it, I'm like, yes, 1,000%
that is so
yes.
sick. Yeah.
I wish that they would make more of those, but I think also just the shock culture you can't replicate from that
There you go.
movie.
Yeah, and I'm so excited. I think I really see that we're kind of getting back. We're going back to go forward, and that's one of the most exciting things. And the way
Yeah.
that we're able, to do it with a future generation is like a time warp thing happening right now. But I'm excited about what's ahead. Really, I'm really excited.
If you want to talk about blast from the past or like going back in time, one of the coolest things that I bought in the last year is this, which
Yeah,
is,
anything with Kodak on it is nuts.
well, not only is it a Kodak, but the what it is that somebody put me onto this, and I hate it. I,
Yeah,
I probably my favorite thing that I love is that Kodak, they still
yeah,
make mini Bluetooth printers
yeah, yeah,
that you
yeah,
can connect with your phone, and so like I think what it costs like $100 for like a set of cartridges and the machine.
yeah,
And so like whenever I'm at like concerts, I will take like obscene amount of photos now, and then I'm like in the days after the concert, I go and ask people, I'm like, hey, if anyone wants a photo of this
yeah,
moment, it's like
yeah,
I've got it. It's professionally edited. The craziest thing about it too, you can buy like a 60 pack of these on Amazon for like $18, and I'm like, dude, like you don't
yeah,
have to worry about film or logging a giant camera with you everywhere that you probably can't take into a concert venue to begin with. And so
yeah.
like that's just the thing that I love the most to kind of wrap up with this. But Elayna, thank you so much for all the time and sharing what you're doing. I think what you're doing is fascinating. Um, like from the moment that we got introduced to each other, I was like, this is somebody who I constantly want to have in my orbit, bouncing off ideas,
Yeah.
which you become more than like a beneficial in that.
Thanks,
So
Tristan.
like, and
Yeah.
obviously, like I'm helping you with different things as well. So
Yeah,
you
absolutely. Yeah,
know,
this was yeah, you're awesome and I love
oh
advances
stop it, I'm
yeah,
not.
advancements in technology can be really useful because as I mentioned, the way that we got together was through a robot superconnector.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a really amazing time that all of these
I
things are
I want
existing.
to push back on what you're saying. I'm not awesome. I'm just a nerd who somehow has managed to like find the will to stay on the internet and be an ordinary guy. So like
Which
that,
is that persona that you have, that authentic ability to just be yourself, I think is a superpower, and I think that that's what makes you awesome. So I really appreciated this, and actually when we get to Can, the conversation with the chief brand officer at LinkedIn is actually, the title of it is the future of distribution, how Gen Z builds trusted scale. And we will be producing that video. And so I'd love to share it with you so you can take a look at what their perspective is and how they see the future moving forward. Could be a good one
A-
for Culture
ab-
Shock.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, if we get to like exclusively put out that video, that'd be hilarious. No, I'm
Oh,
kidding. I would rather you put it out than us, or like at least give time to like have it out there before anything.
yeah.
Um, for the people that want to find you and see what you're doing though, like where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm very private and elusive, but I do. I'm trying to build up my LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/ Elayna Christine is where you can find me. And I love conversations like these, and I welcome them all the time. I am a certified yapper, so any opportunity I have to talk to
Yeah,
anyone is always a plus for me. So yeah, I look forward to continuing the conversation and also just seeing where we're going. I think this is a really cool
yeah.
time.
I think that's the biggest thing I'm focused on right now. So again, like glad that we got to have these conversations that we've had so far, and that I know there will be plenty more as time progresses. And for everyone watching or listening to the show, thank you so much for giving your time to us, myself and every guest that I bring on this project. I feel like this is going to be the most impactful thing that I've ever launched in my career, outside of my current company, because like that's more expansive. But this is something where it's like, rather than interviewing people, it's a love letter to culture, and like just, hey, instead of like great conversations that then people can add to, like, oh, I was featured on this, it's like, no, we had great conversations and we are just normal people. We're not trying to build a new media thing. And also, shout out to our sponsors for this episode. Shout out to the other companies that we work with. If you want to pick up merch, we're dropping merch soon. And also, like, Elayna is part of being on here. I'll make sure to get you some merch as well.
Oh, awesome.
Um, and then for people that want to support us everywhere, um, social media handles are in the description down below. Finally got everything sorted out with like different social media companies, to where like the names and usernames that we want to have, we can have, minus one little hiccup that I'm currently dealing with. But otherwise, like, I'm happy, and again, Culture Shock is just a place where I hope great conversations can happen more.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tristan.